Bupkis and bup up. Oh, welcome everyone to the Jenna Julien Podcast.
Just us this week.
There's no one to awkwardly high five over.
I know, high five over, exactly.
I like when people send us those gifts that are like what the guest feels like, and it's like that lady from Family Feud with her entire family just
high-fiving over.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a nice little streak there. 3 weeks of guests in a row.
Yeah.
So it's good to be back, just us two, having it out, J&J style.
True, missed you.
Missed you. How you doing?
I'm good. Well, I don't know. How are you doing?
I'm good. We're back, guys. Thanks for watching. So, we had an idea for this week to talk about something that's pretty relevant just because of the event this weekend.
And near and dear to our hearts.
I
think this makes the third podcast that we've had about the UFC.
Yes.
In some capacity.
Not
to mention the other ones where we just make references and or talk about it.
Which is like every podcast. Like my analogies always circle around UFC.
True.
But yeah, we wanted to talk about the UFC as its own kind of subject and stuff going on, within the UFC right now and the organization as a whole. But we also wanted to discuss the amazing and hugely popular Ronda Rousey. So I guess we could start off with the UFC.
Yeah, because there's some things happening now.
Well, yeah, it's worth talking about, I think. For those who don't know, the UFC is the Ultimate Fighting Championship. It is the major player in terms of organizations for mixed martial arts, which is fighting, that we are big fans of.
Phone
pipe. And we've been fans of the UFC forever.
Yeah.
You were a fan before I even met you, and I was a fan before you met me. And I guess the main thing that we wanted to touch on is there's been a lot of changes recently in the UFC. So to give a bit of background, if I might,
please.
The UFC, it's centered around the structure of sponsorships before recently. And what I mean by that is that fighters, athletes who are employed by the UFC, were able to independently go out and get their own sponsors. Companies, brands, whoever wanted to sponsor that fighter, whoever liked what that fighter was about and would be willing to pay them in order for them to wear their brand on, say, their fight shorts or their walkout shirt or their banner. Banners no longer exist now. I think. Maybe. Actually, I think they...
I feel like I've seen them, but it just has like their picture and like social Reebok media and Reebok stuff.
Yeah. And so the reason it's such a big deal is that the way it was, fighters didn't have to solely rely on just the money that they were getting paid for fighting. There's fight money, there's show money, and then there's win money, and then there's, of course, bonuses.
Right.
So... For instance, say I'm a lower, one of the younger, newer fighters to the organization. Say I'm getting, and these figures are completely off my dome. Like, I don't know anything about who gets paid what. But say I'm a newer fighter of the UFC, and I get $20,000 to show up and $20,000 to win. Mm-hmm. So if I just lose, but I show up and make weight and everything, I get $20,000.
Right.
But if you think about it, I'm not getting all that money. I got to pay my trainers.
Right.
I got to pay everyone who basically, my team who helped me get to the point of stepping into the octagon for the fight. And what helps is getting paid a lot of money, not a lot, but a lot more money than nothing from sponsors.
Right.
Recently, the UFC has signed an exclusive deal with Reebok for their apparel, for everything. So now, fighters no longer get to have the opportunity of going out and getting their own sponsors. Everyone's sponsored by Reebok. So it's basic...
In the UFC.
In the UFC. So if you're a UFC fighter, you are under the Reebok umbrella now. Right. You wear Reebok on your shorts. All the shorts are the same now. Which that is also kind of interesting because a lot of people just wore their favorite types of shorts or their favorite gear in fights and now they can't.
Right.
So... I think the biggest thing, and I think this is completely objective here, and I'm just pointing out the fact that MMA fans aren't super happy with a lot of the Reebok deal. And I think the reason for that is that the UFC has put the fighters in a situation where they either need to escalate up the rankings very, very fast or not fight in the UFC in terms of making a living.
Right.
Because some of these fighters are not getting paid enough to do what they do. Not even comfortably, but just not at all.
Which is a little ridiculous because the UFC has enough money to be paying people, their livings for them to stay and be happy.
Yeah.
This is kind of a choice on the UFC's part. And who's to say really what's going on, if this is Reebok that structured the deal in a way that was unfair to some people, or if it was
and
the
nobody
UFC.
can know that.
And I think maybe it was just a combination of a lot of things that led to this not being the greatest deal ever for independent people.
Yeah.
But I mean, just think of it this way, for those of you that aren't, super into UFC or MMA and that kind of thing. Think of like a NASCAR car. Like, they're covered in sponsors all the time. It's the culture of the sport. Right. It was sort of the culture of sport in the UFC to be sort of covered in sponsors. And now you haven't touched on this yet, but the guy that puts like the Vaseline on their faces, what's his Stitch?
Yeah, Stitch Duran, the cut man. He was.
Yeah, why don't you get into that?
Yeah, really quickly though, you mentioned that NASCAR's, and drivers.
Imagine they just stripped everybody's sponsors away and everyone was driving a Reebok car
or something. Yeah. The thing about that is hold on. The thing.
Go ahead.
The UFC isn't done with sponsors. The fighters are.
Right,
so you look at the octagon, the floor that they fight on, and it's plastered with sponsors.
Right.
There's Monster Energy, there's movies, there's all sorts of stuff that the UFC is now getting sponsored by. So that means I don't know for sure, but I guess that means that the UFC is pocketing that.
Well, no one else is.
Sponsorship money. Well, not the fighters.
Right,
yeah.
Not the fighters.
So it will be one thing if, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it will be one thing if the UFC was like, you know what, no more sponsors, we're changing the culture of the sport, and the octagon was plain, there was no sponsors anywhere.
Right.
That's one thing. But the UFC is continuing to have those on the floor, so it is a little conflicting, and it's confusing because it does seem, it comes off selfish. It comes off greedy when you look at that, because it's like, okay, then the UFC is getting sponsorship money.
Right. Well, because there's been plenty of fighters that have used their voices loudly to say that it's not benefiting them in particular.
And that is the biggest reason why fans are upset, because they're seeing firsthand on Twitter these fighters literally just say, I am broke.
Yeah,
I used to make money on sponsors. All my sponsors who I've developed relationships with for years, because that takes a while.
It does.
These sponsorships to trust you, to pay you more money each fight, to develop relationships. Right. And now that's all gone. That's off the table with the Reebok deal.
Well, because think of Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. He used to only be sponsored by Xbox.
Yeah, which is a huge deal.
Baller, because he was the only one that had a sponsor like that. Like, that's just his shorts just say Xbox. Like that.
John Jones in his prime when he was here, Nike.
Right, and wasn't Anderson Silva just Burger King?
And Nike.
Like, it's a serious status symbol to not be covered in 10 sponsors, but like one huge sponsor.
Yeah, it comes, and now
they're getting paid fairly. Do you know what I mean? For that, them to just sell out their entire shorts, their entire brand to just Xbox, just Burger King, just Nike.
Yeah. And we do want to remind you guys that we love the UFC. We have great contacts, and we have a great relationship with the UFC. So this is us purely just speaking our minds and what's going on. Because if we were to talk about the UFC and just ignore this, it wouldn't be doing you guys right. It would be it's not being honest, and that's what this podcast is about. But I do want to. You mentioned Stitch, the guy who stands on the side of the octagon and puts Vaseline on the fighters' faces before the fight and comes in between rounds to fix their cuts, their swelling, basically allow the fight to go past one round. Mm-hmm. His name was Stitch. That was his nickname, Duran, and he was the UFC cut man for a long time, and the UFC fired him after he spoke out about not being able to wear sponsors on his cutman vest after the Reebok deal happened. And I know that there's more to it than people know. There has to be.
There has to be.
But it didn't look good. And people, if you're a fan of the sport, you are 100% automatically a fan of Stitch Duran. You can't not like him. He's a happy guy. Every fighter loves him. He does an incredible job keeping fights going. Like, people will have cuts and stuff that you're like, they should stop the fight. He'll come in between rounds and fix it up. I don't know how, but he's the best of the best. And it was upsetting for a lot of MMA fans to watch Stitch go down like that. After all we saw he did was, hey, I can't make money on sponsors. Reebok is only paying me this amount, when before I could control how much I was making. And for a guy like Stitch, he can't have another job. Like, he can't have a full-time job and be the cut man. He has to be that. So the good thing, I would say, looking forward, is the Reebok deal will end.
It has to.
It's going to end, and either the UFC will renew,
because,
change it, or they'll get out.
Because I think that the amount of backlash has been good because anybody in any profession ever, say you have the ability to, like, in theory, control how much money you make a year.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you want more money and you create more sponsorships for yourself and do that legwork to get that done, you can make more money. You, in theory, have, a ladder to climb, more control, aside from just how well you do in fights. When you take that ability away from people, like you give them a cap, you give them a ceiling. Nobody likes having their options taken away. No one likes having flexibility taken away from their job, especially if they're used to it from day one.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that the people that are speaking out in a way that's constructive is helping. Because I don't, obviously, you can scream from the mountains that you're pissed the fuck off and shit. But there are some people that have made some really great points that I think will be taken very seriously.
Absolutely.
Because in theory, the only reason why this sponsorship, like total takeover sponsorship, should have happened is if every single person it's affecting is making more money.
More money.
Right.
Not drastically less.
Not less money.
There was an open letter for those hardcore MMA fans, you know what the Underground is. It's a website, blog, forum. It's been around for years.
Please, I know what you're going to say already. It's going to make me laugh.
What?
That guy, when he was talking about what their shorts looked like.
It was, basically...
That made me laugh out loud.
The open letter, it was to Dana White, the president of the UFC. And the open letter was from a fan, and he just this long-winded wall of text explaining why he speaks for the fans and saying that he's upset with the Reebok deal. And he did it in the most polite and respectful way possible. Right. He prefaced everything with, Dana, I'm a huge fan of you. I am very, very lucky as an MMA fan to be in a sport that you have largely created, a foundation for. And then he goes on to say, and he glazes over a little bit the fighters get paid because I think he just didn't know too much about that, which is true. Not a lot of people know exact details. But he did talk about how seeing his favorite fighters tell the world that they can't afford to train or they can't afford to have this camp or stuff like that is very weird, and it's shocking for a fan, and it's not something that a fan can look at and be happy about.
Right.
What she was saying is they now have fighter kits, which is a shirt and shorts, like gear that they wear to fight nights. And before, literally that was up to anyone. What's his name? There was one fighter, I'm blanking on his name. He's old-time fighter. He showed up one time in a Speedo, and he fought in a Speedo. Like, the rules were that rigid. Not saying that you should do that, and I was there for that fight, actually.
Well, remember in the beginning of the UFC, they were allowed to fight in their gis and whatever the fuck they wanted.
There was regulations. Like, you had shorts, you had spandex.
Right, there's somewhat regulation now. Well, not prior to the Reebok
Prior to the uniforms, there were regulations.
Different things.
You could wear a very few amount of things, but the point is you could wear any brand.
Misha Tate could wear a skirt she wanted to.
You could wear fight skirts. You could wear, the men
right.
wear
you still have choices.
Yeah.
Now you don't. You have
now
Reebok,
Reebok.
Reebok.
It's spandex or board shorts now.
And they're all black and white.
They're not black. Yeah, they're black and white. Yeah.
Just their gloves, the tape are red and blue.
But that's just the corner.
Right.
So, yeah, the base, looking at a fight now compared to before the Reebok deal, it just looks more corporate, which is, it's fine. If the idea is to change the way the sport looks, make it look more official, give them uniforms, that's fine.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that innately. Just make sure that when you're doing that, the fighter pay doesn't at least get so drastically affected that the fighters are tweeting about it,
Well, yeah, because us as fans and them as fighters, this is their professional job.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? We pay $50 to $75 pay-per-view or whatever the fuck. And if you want to go see in person, it's not cheap. And we do that on a regular basis as fans so that these people, hopefully, in theory, can do nothing every single waking moment of their life but be the best physical fighter that they can. And then go get your money and do whatever else you want.
Absolutely.
But the position that this is putting these people in is that they're having to get really crafty in ways to make extra income that they are now missing. And I don't want that. Nobody wants that. We want you guys to train.
We want you to be busy training.
Do your job and do what you want to do because we want to see people fight at their best abilities. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Plus, it's less of a sport now, and it's more of we're watching these guys at work and they're all desperate, and it's it doesn't feel like the same it did. Right.
Well, it also creates a lot of room for desperation, people begging to get more work, more
fights.
Well,
you see it too often, guys, after a big knockout, they'll get on the mic and say, hey, how about that bonus now? And it's as a fan, you're like, oh, that doesn't look great.
Right, no.
It's like, are they that desperate right now?
Well, they need their fucking money, man. These people have short careers in theory.
Oh, yeah.
You're lucky. I would love to have some statistic, but I know the statistics for, people even making it to a college sport, let alone an elite level like this. Yeah. Your chances of having a career over 1 year professionally
in football, that's like a stat.
Ridiculous. Yeah. Like if you're fighting for 10 years, that's just absolutely insane. Yeah. So if you think these people have been broke for their road leading up to getting signed with UFC.
And they finally made it.
They finally make it. These people can be riddled with injuries, other things. But you just don't make it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just mathematically the odds are stacked against you. Yeah. You're now giving these people they know that their career in theory might not be that long. Yeah. They need to make as much money as they can right now. Yeah. And you've taken away their ability to cash in while they can.
Absolutely.
I would be pretty fucking desperate too.
Well, you think about it like this. It's like you're a minor league baseball player for years and years and years and years, and you finally get the call up and you get a contract with the Angels. Like, you're not getting paid chump change. You're making money once you're up there.
Right.
And that's how it was.
I think Major League isn't it just if you're on the bench of a fucking actual team, it's $300,000 to $400,000 a year.
Yeah, but that's for contracts. When you get called up, you might not have a contract.
Well, of course not.
But yeah, the point is when you reach the top of the sport.
That seems like a lot of money until you realize that, in a year from now, you're back down. Yeah. And if you would like to stay, right, you need that money.
I want to say that the UFC has done so many things right in their time.
Agreed.
They've
done much more right than wrong.
They've so much more right than wrong. And I think this is a hiccup that in a couple of years, hopefully we can look back on and say, I'm glad we steered away from that.
Right.
But there's one thing that I think is the fighter kits, when they were announced and Reebok was tweeting them out, like pictures of their shirts with their names, there was like, I don't know, I want to say like 8 misspelled names on these official fighter kits, and these fighters were tweeting, like you would see fighters tweeting like, hey, that's like not how you spell my name. There was Gilbert Melendez. His said Giblert, and a Twitter account came up, Giblert Melendez.
I did not.
And it was that picture.
You misspelled Gilbert?
It says Giblert.
Oh my God.
And the Twitter account came up, and he's just like a troll now. He's like, so glad you guys can buy my fight kit. It says my name.
That's really funny.
I don't know who made the slip up there, but that getting out was just a bad look. It was like it showed whoever was responsible, maybe Reebok, maybe someone at the UFC, who knows.
It might just be a really tired intern. Who knows?
The point is they went for it and they released those, and it just looked bad. It was like the first thing Reebok had put out, and it was like, wow.
Well, yeah, that certainly doesn't send a good precedent. But I think that in theory, the idea of having the entire UFC have one single sponsor for everyone is not a bad idea.
No, it's not. If you're trying to move away from the look of having your sponsors plastered all over you.
And I mean, imagine how difficult it is for everyone to manage all of their own sponsors and the UFC to do that on a regular basis. Yeah. That's like, what anybody does that, even with the podcast, to go through the legwork to get
the sponsors. It's not easy. It's not short work. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's, a team of people's full-time job at the UFC to decide which sponsors are going where and how big they are, and to just have all of that be wiped away for the opportunity to just do one big huge deal is like a dream come true. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's a bad idea.
No.
And I would like to say that there's no harm in them trying this with Reebok, but
Absolutely.
It did harm people. It did harm people's incomes, and some people suffered because of it. Yeah. But I think in the future, if they choose to tweak this deal and make sure that it's more fair for people, that it's not a bad thing to have the entire everything sponsored by one sponsor.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, because it could work. There's enough money to go around.
Yeah, but I mean, between Reebok and the UFC, you can make sure that people can feed their families, okay?
And we're not talking like $100,000 paychecks for every fighter. No, we're talking about enough to make sure that they can cover their camp.
Train.
They can pay their coaches, pay their rent. And fly to fight,
Because now they're walking a delicate line of people considering leaving and going to other organizations, which is something not good for anybody.
The UFC knows that.
Well, I mean, it's good for lots of people, and people should have choices. I think that's really important. Yeah. But it's not helping the UFC.
No.
You know what I mean?
No, it's not.
By giving people a reason to leave. No. That's not the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you said about the fact that it would be nice to say and sit here right now that...
say it did no harm?
It did no harm.
It did do harm,
It did do harm. But you know what? That doesn't mean the UFC really fucked up. That means the UFC took a misstep on a lot of people's opinions, and they can move forward in a more constructive way, learning from this. Learning maybe Reebok isn't bad. Maybe the way we structure this deal wasn't in our best interest and on our fighters' best interest, and in turn our image's best interest.
But it doesn't make me think poorly of Reebok or the UFC.
Neither of them, because you don't know what's going on.
There's so many moving parts to this
So many
deal
people involved.
Honestly, it could have been something as easy as underestimating how much money fighters made.
That's absolutely possible. That's absolutely possible.
Someone just
they signed a deal and didn't realize.
Fair, and all right, let's do it.
Yeah, that's 100%.
There's so many other bigger things to consider in terms of an entire branded thing.
Yeah, and you know what? Another thing is that people who change the game, people who are renegades, who make very big waves and leave a legacy, in their wake when they're done, they don't do everything right always. And I would like to say that the UFC is among that class. They have done so much good for the sport of MMA. When they signed the Fox deal, sure, there weren't great things about that, but there was also amazing things about that. That broke them more into the mainstream than they've ever become. They were on Fox Sports. They now are on Fox. And so what I'm getting at is that the UFC, if they are the organization that I believe them to be, and a lot of people do believe them to be, they're going to move past this in a more directional and positive route than they could have ever done without having to go through this mess. They're going to take it and use it to their advantage.
And who knows, maybe something, this is just, I'm fucking throwing shit out there.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe Nike is sitting around laughing at this Reebok deal. And then once this contract is up, they swoop in and they're like, hey guys, we'd like to pay everyone a shit ton, butt ton
Oh my God.
money.
Nike did that to Reebok at the CrossFit Games.
There you go. That's
Do you know what they did? Did you hear about this?
I'm not 100% sure of the logistics, but you are more than welcome to tell me.
Okay, so Nike created a shoe called the Metcon, which is their first CrossFit shoe. They broke into the CrossFit market with the Metcon, and everyone wanted it. Everyone and their mom wanted it. Even all the hardcore CrossFit people who are hardcore Reeboks, who wear the Nanos, which is the Nano shoe, the Reebok's version of CrossFit shoe. Anyway, at the CrossFit Games, Nike parked their giant fucking van or something, big bus outside of the CrossFit Games because the CrossFit Games banned Nike.
They're sponsored by Reebok.
They're sponsored by Reebok exclusively, so no competitors could wear the Nike Metcons. And they had a big sign that says, "Don't ban our shoe, beat it."
Ooh.
And it was really funny because there's a whole marketing war now between but it's just really funny because
that sucks for them, but it's fun for all of us.
It's fun for everyone, when people compete like that. But you're right, there could be bigger brands who are like, you know what, we can do this way better, let's wait our turn. But yeah, no, I think it's good that we talked about it. I think it's on our minds. Every time we watch a fight now, something's different. So
can you please already tell them what that guy said?
Okay, so the guy in the open letter, I'm quoting him, but it might not be exactly what he said. But in the open letter to Dana White, he gets to the part where he's talking about the UFC fighter kits, and he said it looks like the fighters are now a cross between an ice cream popsicle and an Uno deck. Because their name is coming across
fucking
diagonally.
Made me cry laughing.
I think that's what he said. It was really funny.
It was really funny because they look like Uno decks.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Well, moving on. Right? You good?
Yeah.
I want to talk about Ronda Rousey briefly. Ronda Rousey, who everyone ever now knows her name, which is awesome, has just completely broken into the next level of stardom.
The entire fucking division.
Aside from the fact that she's completely wrecked everyone she's fought, and no one can even come close right now, she's reached a point of stardom that GSP took years to reach, that Spider Anderson Silva took years to reach. Right. And even they, I don't think, crossed over to where Ronda has crossed over.
She's breaking barriers regardless of gender and
regardless of everything. She's changing, so many things. And so many good things come of what Ronda Rousey has done. It's very interesting to see. It's very awesome to see because, for a while, she came across as this kind of standoffish, I'm not going to talk to you, I'm just going to do my fighting there. And that got her a lot of haters, I guess you could say.
Right.
People were like, oh, Ronda's a bitch. Like, why would I like her?
Right.
But she kept with it. And it was like, you know, she really did prove her worth in fighting and winning and destroying everyone. And then slowly warming up and being like, you know what? This is who I am, guys.
Right.
Deal with it. Enjoy it. And now everyone fucking loves her.
I'm not here to entertain you. I'm literally that much of a professional where I fuck off.
And she's the most professional there is. She was in the Olympics. She won a bronze medal in judo.
Fucking insane how much of a professional
People
she is.
don't understand what that means.
She makes people around her just look like chickens with their heads cut off. Even John Jones. She's making him look like the biggest mockery of like the top of the top. Do you know what I mean?
Because of how he acts.
Because of how
and
he has conducted
she's a
himself.
complete professional.
Right. And, you know, people call her, you know, standoffish or those kind of things until they realize now that all of their other idols have fallen to the wayside.
Because of stupid shit they've done.
I guess maybe I should take her seriously because she's
that's
the only one that
that's
takes
a great
herself
point, because
ridiculously seriously. She's taken herself so seriously she doesn't give people an option to not.
And it was only a matter of time before people started to realize what she was about. I like to tell the story.
Well, you know that because you met her forever.
So I like to tell the story because
Joey's been a Ronda Rousey fan since Ronda Rousey was fucking born.
I like to pride myself on knowing about certain people, just a handful of people before they were absolutely massive.
True.
I used to do a radio show in college where it was called Fighting Solo Radio. That's
Are
how the
any
name.
of those still around? Can we still hear those?
I have all of them.
You do?
I have all of them.
You should
on my drive.
Because you've interviewed some incredible people.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would say they're pretty cool people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I basically interviewed fighters and people in the sport of MMA all through college on this radio show. And Ronda was nice enough to come on the radio show via phone interview. But before that, in January of 2012, I believe, I was in the business or hobby, I guess you could say. I wasn't getting paid, of blogging and covering MMA events, like local MMA events. I would go, put on my tie, take my camera, take my recorder, and go to local events and see who I can interview, see who I can watch, do write-ups. Always in my tie. And I went to this one fight in Santa Monica. It was called... I can't remember what it was called. I'll remember later, but it was a local fight promotion. I got contacted with the promoter, and he was like, yeah, sure, come by. We'll give you a press pass. And I was like, fuck yeah. Anytime I got a press pass, I was like, yeah, sweet. Anyway, she was there. And at the time, Ronda was in Strikeforce. She had a couple fights in Strikeforce, but I think she had just beat Julia Budd, which is one of the first fights people started to notice her.
Right.
She broke her arm. And she's sitting cage side, because she's just the guest of the event. And I was with my brother Marlon. I was like, Marlon, I'm going to go try to get Ronda. So I somehow sneak over. At the time, she was dating Henry Akins, who's a jiu-jitsu guy. He got up from his chair next to her, so I took it. And I was like, hey, Ronda, can I chat with you really quick? I'd love to have a conversation. And she was like, yeah, have a seat right in my boyfriend's chair. So I was like, oh, shit. So I sat down. I had a great conversation with her. She went to my high school, by the way. Anyway, we had a great talk. It was so cool to have a conversation with her. She later agreed to come on my radio show. So she probably doesn't remember me, but I've had 2 interviews with Ronda before even 2012.
There's a picture of her and you from behind of you guys.
I should repost that. That's like my 3rd picture I ever posted on Instagram.
It's pretty fucking epic.
Yeah, it was cool. Photo credit to Marlon for that one.
Marlon's just back there with his phone like, oh shit, man, I should do a push-up.
Oh man, but yeah, it's like having been in that position, and you know, I have a good friend, Mark, who's been my MMA buddy forever, and when I told him about that, he was like, "You have no idea how big of a deal that is." She wasn't a big deal, and he was like, "You don't know how big of a deal that is that you just did that right now," and. I like to say he was right because she's absolutely blown up. Right. The Rock is always talking about her. She's the biggest of the biggest now, and it's very, very cool to see what she's accomplished in the sport and it beyond. Right. You know, she's done amazing things. And that fight, holy shit.
Yeah.
Did you notice that at the weigh-ins, Betch Correa was yelling? She was yelling.
Oh yeah.
They translated what she was saying.
What did it say?
Don't cry when I knock you out. So when Ronda knocked her out, she turned around and said, "Don't cry."
Ooh.
It was like perfect. It was like you can't write that shit.
Yeah, Betch didn't cry though, so
she didn't cry, but it was perfect.
Good listening, Betch. Good listening.
Betch didn't cry.
I saw, obviously, you know, I can't say enough about Ronda. It's just fucking incredible to watch her win that fight without, you know, she had her in a position where she was going to go for some judo. She was was literally going to, you know, flip her with some fucking judo magic.
Yeah.
And didn't.
She chose not to. She had her completely in the clinch. She
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it would take 3 seconds of her magical upside-down gravity hips to toss her, and she didn't.
Yeah.
And she knocked her out anyways.
Yeah.
It's completely mind-blowing and ridiculous. But what I was going to say is that Sonia Hawkes also, like, I saw her on Instagram, a picture of Ronda Rousey split with Brienne of Tarth. It was like, this is the only logical opponent for Ronda Rousey.
I can't think of who else except for Cyborg, but I still think she'll wreck Cyborg.
Chris Cyborg has said she would literally die if she dropped 235 pounds.
Is that Tommy Toho?
No, it was that Dana White recording of him sitting in there talking.
Oh, that was literally what Dana said.
Yes,
yeah,
he was like so
her people
adamant.
were saying that shit.
Like, Chris Cyborg said she would literally die. She's not gonna do it, all right?
Yeah.
I was like crying. But what I want to know, what I'm more interested in, especially, like, I know you're a little bit more removed from, like, the underground of all of that, because you used to be so far into it when you were doing the radio show and that kind of stuff. You know, now you have other things that you do as opposed to getting people on your college radio station, which is everything. It was epic. One of the first times we met, you were on the phone with Shayna Baszler. I'm like, bitch, I fucking love you.
That was fun, yeah.
What the fuck was I going to say? Okay, what I'm interested in is who in the fuck is training right now as a female that could even, like, you know, we talk about Rory McDonald and some of the fighters that come up learning MMA
as a whole,
instead of coming
so
from
who's the female doing that right now?
One particular fight background, because Holly Holm, is that her name? Yeah, she's a kickboxer, right? Yeah. And she's nasty, but she's not exactly the new breed of, like, MMA fighter.
She's not Rory McDonald or anything like that.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, she's someone that has some clout. Paige has some clout behind her. Yeah. But I'm interested to see, like, a new breed of female fighter that might be able to come up in the world, in the sport, because what the fuck, man? There's just no one that can touch her. I want to know who their 12-year-old self has been, like, completely inspired by Ronda and is like, I'm going to do that. What 12-year-olds are there?
I'll tell you one thing.
Send them my way.
Whatever they are, however rounding their game out they are with MMA, they're definitely doing judo.
Oh, everybody's doing
judo now.
Everybody's doing judo.
It's like, it was like 5 years ago when people were like, holy shit, if you have a background in wrestling, you were going to be a kick-ass fighter in MMA.
Oh, if you're
Everyone was like, I need to be a background in wrestling. Everyone joined wrestling gyms. Yeah. GSP just learned wrestling on his own. He developed a college fucking wrestling background in his gym.
No. GSP did that after, like, his gymnastics training. Okay?
Yeah. Oh my God. GSP and his fucking gymnastics. To answer your question, it's a very it's vast, and I would love to do more research and to look into it, because I love that shit, into finding who's really up and coming right now, because obviously people have been talking about Holly Holm forever, and she's a kickboxer, but she hasn't really proved to be devastating.
Agreed.
So
although I'm sure she'll have a fantastic career no matter what happens.
She already is. She's fighting great fights.
As will lots of other female fighters. But I have a question for you, because, you know, do you think that Ronda will retire undefeated?
No. I don't think I think she'll lose before she retires. But retires. I mean,
but, like, what if she decided
to do a Gina Carano and go to Hollywood?
I mean, yeah, it's not like she can't do other things. She can do whatever she wants at this point.
You know, I think the reason I say yes, she's probably going to lose before she retires, is because even John Jones, like, gets beaten up some. Right. You know what I mean? Even some of the best fighters. So she's going to eventually fight someone, I think, hopefully, if she's in the sport long enough, which I desperately hope she is, where they catch her with a couple punches and she's off her game, and then suddenly, you know, she lost. And I think that loss
what if she just decided, like, hey, it's been real, and I would like to retire undefeated, because that's bananas.
It's bananas, but that's rare. That's so rare. That's even more rare than someone like Ronda coming around.
Right.
So I would be like, holy shit, if that happened, that's insane, amazing.
Well, I mean,
but I don't think...
just considering the way that everything's gone now, do you think that it's impossible for the next 10 years she meets 0 opponents that can beat her, and she ends up just, you know, out of necessity or age or whatever, she retires undefeated?
Well, I guess you're right.
Do you think that's feasible? Because I think that it's feasible.
I think it's feasible. Mm-hmm. If I'm a betting man, I would say she loses before she retires. But no, I think that's absolutely more than possible. No. She'll beat Chris Cyborg. Cyborg's not going to be any problem for her.
She will literally die. She goes to one.
I love when Ronda tweets at Cyborg, like, hey, get off the roids and we'll fight. Like, get off the roids and make way and let's fucking fight. It's just so funny. Ronda gives no fucks.
None fucks. Negative fucks.
Well, thank you, Ronda, for an incredible weekend and something to talk about on the podcast.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Fantastic.
It
can't
really,
wait to, I feel like she's fighting every 2 weeks also, which is badass.
It's so badass. But that's, again, speaks to her level of professionalism.
And her elite athleticism. Like, no one can do that. Which, yeah, so.
Well, yeah, because, what does she... She looks like she might walk around at, 155.
Yeah.
And she can be ready to fight every 2 weeks at 135. It's just fucking
Not only
bananas.
that, but she takes 0 damage every fight. Like, she's just, got out of the shower after a fight. Like, are you okay? Right. Yeah, I'm fine. Like, I didn't even get touched. I got punched once, but it felt like someone elbowed me. Yeah. Like, on the way to the subway. But, yeah. I'm definitely excited to see both the direction the UFC goes and also the direction they take in terms of finding shit for Ronda to do.
Right.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Well, if Ronda, if you're just hanging out and you don't got a fight coming up, just hang out with us. Come on the podcast.
Yeah, she just is she just gonna rematch everybody?
Well, I think they're talking about a Miesha Tate third fight, which I don't necessarily think is great. But if there's enough,
I want a Liz Carmouche rematch.
We were there for that Liz Carmouche fight. That was the first fight in the UFC, first female fight in the UFC.
Yeah, I was there, and you were there, and I was living.
Grabbed her back and was attempting a rear naked chokehold, standing up, and
Did Uriah Faber choke somebody out just a few rounds before like that, right? Didn't he? Wasn't it Uriah Faber?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. He choked out. Oh, I'm forgetting everyone's name. He's the Canadian. He trains with GSP.
Yeah, I don't know.
Forget his name. But yeah, he did the same standing rear naked chokehold.
And then Liz Carmouche climbed her like a little monkey and got back there. And Ronda, she got out. But
Jenna, you love Liz Carmouche.
I do.
She's a baller.
I love Liz Carmouche because she gives no fucks. She's like, yeah, dude, just was in the military.
Nobody was giving her even the slightest chance to be competitive in that fight. And she almost won.
Because she had nothing to lose. She had everything to gain.
And she went into that fight exactly like that.
Yeah, and it was a pleasure to watch her try and choke out Ronda.
Yeah.
But it was just so legit.
Yeah,
I was living that
was
night.
Dope.
It was very exciting.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry if you guys are sitting there and what are they talking about? Because I feel like there's some of you who are probably like that. But we wanted to do this podcast, and I'm happy we did.
Well, yeah, because I really like this stuff.
I love this stuff. I'll forever be a fight fan, and hopefully forever be a UFC fan. I love them so much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what unfolds next. Where they go, and can Jon Jones get his shit together? Because I want to see him fight again.
Yeah, seriously. I'm over his fucking
antics.
Life, man. I'm over your life,
Your antics are getting in the way of my Saturday nights.
Right?
I want to see you elbow people. I want to see you beat Daniel Cormier. Again.
Isn't Daniel Cormier fighting Alexander Gustafsson soon?
Yeah.
When is that?
I don't fucking know. Don't talk to me about Daniel Cormier.
Julian's had it.
Oh, man.
Had it. We had an entire podcast about us talking about, okay, so if Daniel Cormier spits in Jon Jones' face.
Oh, my God.
And Jon Jones murders him. 3 seconds inside of the octagon and he dies. Is it murder?
So funny. That was our second podcast.
The entire
whole podcast was just what if
hypothetical questions about
we were just the
murder.
best lawyers ever. We just became lawyers all of a sudden.
Lawyers? We did not become lawyers at all. We became fucking idiots.
No, we were the smartest lawyers in the world. We're if he says I'll kill you 2 steps up onto the octagon, he's liable for murder. But 3 steps, it's too close to the fight.
Then it's premeditated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We were experts of the law.
Oh, yeah. Just so expert, Julian.
Oh, well.
Anyways. Thanks for tuning in,
Thank you guys for hanging out with us this week. Good podcast.
Let us know your thoughts about Ronda Rousey. Let us know your thoughts about
the UFC.
The UFC, the sponsorship, and where you see the future of that contract with them going.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Where you see Ronda's future going. And if you know any badass 12-year-old girls, I would love to interview a 12-year-old fucking little girl MMA kid.
There was a young judoka who was like, I think 12. She was, and there was like videos floating around of her, and she was pretty incredible, like a couple of years ago. So I wonder where she is.
Right.
Yeah, we should look that up.
Although not that it matters if she's 12 or 21, but
young, prime.
No, not even that, because like people get burnt out. That's what they say. Like people that have been doing sports ever since they were tiny.
Ronda's the exception to the rule.
They burn out. Yeah. But even still, she did judo her entire life, and then she changed sports in theory.
So it's like a refreshing.
Right. So that's like saying if you did gymnastics for 10 years, you might get burnt out of gymnastics, but if you became a diver, it would be beneficial.
That's a good analogy.
But the statistics of people burning out that start when they're super young, because parents, stupid assholes, make the
run their kids into the ground
of burning them out so young. So not necessarily needs to be 12. I wouldn't mind if it was like a 21-year-old girl, but someone that was committed to and wanted to, because there's it's difficult to find people that even have similar mindsets as Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They say it, but I'm not buying it.
You want to see these girls right through college.
Right.
That's a quote from The Office. I'm so sorry.
What the fuck, Julian? Can we ever just get through a podcast without? I can't even get through a day. You guys don't even know.
I'm sorry. Julian, I don't have. It's like a. It's
Julian,
like a.
Just be saying things to me. I'm like, what are you saying? He's like, it's from The Office somewhere.
It's a syndrome. I have it. I can't help it. I'm sorry.
I know you do. It's okay. It's because I've seen a lot of The Office, but I don't know all the references. Yeah.
I have a problem. All right, guys, make sure you check out our guest's website. We'll link it below.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. Good podcast.
Good podcast. Pop.
We love you guys. We're on SoundCloud, iTunes, all the stuff. We'll see you next week for another Popcast.
Pop.
And obviously, hit us in the comments. Let us know what you thought of the podcast.
Yeah.
And we love you guys.
Love you, friends. Bye.
Bye.